Welcome to the Not So Average Jane podcast. Here, we celebrate the remarkable odysseys of female combat veterans, amplify their voices, and honor their courage.
This episode is brought to you by Phillips 66. Providing energy, improving lives.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us again today for another Not So Average Jane podcast where we are showcasing the amazing stories of female combat veterans. Today I have the pleasure of introducing you to Chantilly Tootle. Chantilly, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate
You're welcome.
I found Chantilly on TikTok, which a lot of people don't know how I find some of my Janes. You're now a Jane, Chantilly. And
Okay.
I literally go out and like search hashtags and find, and I think 90% of the women who have shared their stories so far on the podcast have come from TikTok. So
Wow.
interesting little fact. Yeah. So Chantilly, again, thank you so much for joining me today. You have such an amazing, inspirational, and powerful story. I feel like we're two kindred spirits pursuing very similar paths with a little bit slightly different audience and what we're trying to reach. But it is an honor to share your story, and I'm so excited to learn more about you today. And as I typically do, I would love to start with your enlistment story.
Okay, so my name is Chantilly Tootle, as she stated, and I am from Nahana, Georgia. It's a very small town. So I joined the Army when I was 17 years old to kind of escape the little country life and to pay for college. And so I served for 17 years, active duty Army, and I started out in Korea and I ended my career in Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina. I did enlisted for approximately 10 years, and then I switched over to a chief warrant officer.
Wow. So when you joined at 17, because I did as well, you had to go through the whole process of your parents signing over their parental rights to the government, which is kind of crazy when you think about it that way. What was your, like, did you go into the military knowing what you wanted to do? Because there's a lot of kids out there, they're like, oh, I'm going to go in the Army. And I'm like, great, what are you going to do? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm going in the Army.
I primarily went into strictly pay for college. I didn't come from a well-off family. We pretty much lived well in the poverty line in the country in Georgia. And so I knew my parents couldn't afford college and I didn't want to put that stress on them. So I decided to go to the Army so I can get the GI Bill. And I was only going to do 4 years initially, but I was in and I was doing so well. And so I decided to stay in.
Yeah. So what job did you seek initially, or was it like you went and took the ASVAB and the recruiter kind of tried to direct you, or what did that look like?
So in high school, we had two different type of diploma programs. So you can do either a vocational track program or a college prep program. And with the college prep program, you had to take the ASVAB as an aptitude test. And so I took that and passed it. And my dad happens to be an Army vet as well. And so the recruiter was like blowing my line up because I passed. I thought I was just marking things, but I guess I passed. I got tired of it because the exam was so long. I remember taking it seriously at first, and then I'm like, I don't even want to go to the Army, so I don't really care. So especially like on the mechanics part and everything, I just started like just answering questions. But I scored pretty high, and the recruiter was like, I can have any job I wanted. So he started calling my dad all the time. And I remember one day coming home from school, and there was a message on the answering machine from a recruiter about me. And I remember erasing it. I'm thinking, no, don't call my dad. My dad's going to push it. And so my dad, one day, he found out that I had erased it. And I came home another day, and he and Staff Sergeant Tompkins was sitting right there waiting for me. And so he was just telling me about all the opportunities and how small where we're from is and how he wanted me to see the world and get away from there and explore. So that's what I did.
So what job did you go into? What did you go ahead.
I was a part of the Signal Corps. I initially came in as a 74 Charlie. In the early 2000s, they changed all the Signal Corps series to 25 series. And so I had to reclass from a telecommunications specialist to a information system specialist, which is now a 25 Bravo.
Got it. So basic training, where did you go?
Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And now I ended here in Columbia, South Carolina, since retiring.
Full circle.
Yes, definitely full circle moment.
And then AIT was where? did you stay at
At Fort
Jackson?
Gordon, Georgia.
Fort Gordon, Georgia. Okay. And then you already
Mhm.
shared, so your first duty station was Korea. I remember in basic training when orders came down, some of the women that were given Korea, they were upset about it. How did you feel about Korea being your first duty station?
I was actually quite frightened. Like I stated before, I'm from a very small town in Georgia, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going over here all by myself. And I was only about 19 when that happened because my school for AIT was about 7 months initially.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very scared to go by myself, and I was homesick a lot. I did a lot of studying, took a lot of correspondence courses, kind of kept to myself, and I was there for a year.
So if we had discussed before we started recording, ladies and gentlemen, that Chantilly and I are the same age. So I can go back like, okay, you joined at 17. So this is 2001. Did you join pre or post 9/11?
Pre. So I was on a
Wow.
delayed entry program. So I graduated high school at 17. 2 weeks later, I was at reception. I turned 18 in reception at Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when I was in AIT at Fort Gordon, Georgia, that's when I found out that I was probably that's when the Twin Towers hit, when 9/11 happened. And my instructor came in and he's like, it's on now, it's on now. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, we're going to combat. And I'm like, huh? Well, didn't quite sign up for that. I did, but I didn't really. So I was like, well, let's
Right.
get it.
So you were in training when 9/11 happened. So I also was in a delayed entry program, but I hadn't even gone to basic training yet when 9/11 happened. I
Oh, wow.
joined in June of 01, but wasn't slotted to go until January of 2002. So I was like, well, I'll just do a semester of college. And so I was in school that fall when everything happened. I was like, oh snap. Like
It got real.
do you feel like your training got more serious? Like the drill sergeants got a little bit more serious about everything when that happened?
Well, I would say my drill sergeants, I guess the luck of the draw, they were pretty serious before 9/11.
Right.
So didn't really see it, change. They were very persistent on training like we fight and obtaining all the knowledge that we could, all the knowledge that we could while we were there in AIT. Because they did stress the importance of really knowing our job, because communications, how are the people on the front lines going to communicate?
Yeah.
If you know what you're doing to
Very,
provide the telephone and the emails and stuff.
very important job. A lot of people, I had a confrontation somewhat on TikTok over all of the jobs that go outside of infantry. And it was just interesting to see people who thought like, oh, well, you weren't infantry or you weren't on the front line, so you're not a combat veteran, or you're not. Actually, I had someone even say, well, you're not a veteran. And I'm like, what? Where are you getting this craziness? But anyway, so again, doing math, so it's like mid 2002 when you go to Korea.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I went to Korea. It's been a while, so let me calculate. It was about January 2002. Yes, 02.
And then, so tell me about that, your first duty station, how you adjusted, anything that you want to discuss, I guess, being there.
Well, I had a hard time adjusting, like I said, because I'm from a small place and being so far away. And then the tickets to come home on leave were very expensive, like over $1,000 at the time. That wasn't much for me because I was only a private first class, the E3, so I wasn't making much money. And then I did have a traumatic experience. I was almost sexually assaulted at the first duty station, so I really kept to myself after that.
Wow. Do you mind sharing more about that situation?
Sure. So we have, when we have the range, we have to get up very early in the morning. Like I said, I wasn't even there a month when this happened. And so it happened to be the armor for my unit. We had been talking all day. I'm a Southern Belle, you talk to everybody, it's honey child, sugar plum, whatever. So I didn't take anything of it to be conversing with him throughout the day. I didn't think he would take it as like I was interested in him in that way. So back then we had not ACHs, we had our Kevlars. So once we returned from the range, like I said, we had been talking throughout the whole day periodically. And so once we returned from the range, we had to clean our weapons down there in the armory area. I accidentally left my Kevlar when I went back up to my room. So the room, we live in a barracks in Korea. So you have all of your company, pretty much your orderly room and your armory and everything is in the building where you actually live at. So, and everybody knows where you live at when you're in the same company because there's a roster so they can easily get to you if they need to. So he came up to my room to return my Kevlar. And so we kept on talking. And then I had a roommate as well. So we sectioned off our rooms separately from each other with our wall lockers to kind of give ourselves some privacy, like when we're changing and things. So I recall talking to him. I was exhausted. Like I said, we had to get up early on range days. I had been up since about 4:30 a.m. And my roommate, and she came in and she started talking with us as well. So when I fell asleep somehow. So I was on my bed and he was on the foot of my bed sitting, and I was sitting up, and then my roommate was sitting like on a heating unit in the window pane. So she was on my side of the room. Well, when I fell asleep, I guess she left and went on her side of the room because I woke up to him trying to penetrate me. And so I started trying to fight him off or whatever. And somehow I was able to knee him or whatever. I heard my roommate leaving. I'm thinking, oh no, she just left me here. Like, what am I going to do? So I'm just fighting because I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse as well. So I was not going to let that happen again. So I was fighting him. I got free. I was able to knee him in his growing. I went to my roommate's boyfriend's room because I figured that's where she was, up a few floors ahead of me. And I went to get her, like, why did you leave me? And I told her what happened. And she came back to the room with me. And the guy was actually still in there. And then he was trying to apologize profusely and everything and saying it was a misunderstanding. And I'm in shock and scared that he's still there. She's a little girl. She's like 5'1", probably was 110 pounds. She went wailing on him, like, get that out of here. She went nuts on him. And I was afraid to tell. I did not report it. I only told my roommate. I told a close friend, and I didn't report it from fear of reprisal. Being new to the duty station, I didn't know if people were going to believe me or not, and because of my childhood experience and what happened when I, told my mother about that.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack.
Yes.
Okay, I understand. A lot of civilians out there don't understand that the military marches to the beat of its own drum, and the rules kind of bend and twist to accommodate those that have power. And
Yeah.
as a woman, as a minority in a very heavily male dominated space, the last thing you want to do is bring attention to yourself, because
Yes, absolutely.
any type of attention is typically negative attention in the army, in the military in general. So yeah, so you just went quiet. Did he ever like interact with you again?
No, I just, aside from me having to get my weapon from him when I had ranges or anything again, or guard, that's the only time I interacted with him, but I just stayed away from him.
Did he act like scared or
He
anxious
did
about?
initially. I think he was like really afraid for maybe like the first week or two, but then when he realized I wasn't saying anything, and that was 2002, 2003 timeframe. So the programs that they have now, like Sharp and all of those programs in the military, they
Yeah,
weren't prevalent
just
like that. So I'm glad that they have increased those type of programs, but there's still a lot of work to do within the ranks.
1000%. Okay, so 03 things, kick off in Iraq. Are you still in Korea when we invade?
I was not in Korea. I had just got to Fort Gordon, like as they are invading.
Okay. And then let's talk about that. So you're in Fort Gordon and we invade. Did you get a warning order right away? Were you anticipating going over?
I was not, because I was working in a stabilized, I don't know if you ever heard of the GRSOC, but that's the Gordon Regional Security of Operations Center.
Okay.
And they work with the NSA. So it's a branch under the NSA. So I was working from there and still doing combat things like messages and secure messaging and things like that.
Okay, so that's kind of badass, and I want to have a side conversation with you about all of that. Yeah, because I come from an intel background too, so that's
Oh, wow. Okay.
not
I
in the
used to work for
military.
A2 when I retired in the
Well,
Air Force.
I got out of the military and then went into the intel space on the civilian side. So fun stuff, primarily working narcotic investigations, but they
Oh,
all
that's
seem
interesting.
to intertwine with that. But sorry, ladies and gentlemen, most of that's probably, can't be talked about openly in public.
Yeah,
So,
right.
okay, so tell me about that. Like, share with maybe someone who has no idea what the heck you're talking about, what that job entails, what it looks like, obviously to the best of what you can share.
So for the secure messaging, basically, you get messages in and you have to make sure you pass them along through the system. You might have to review some of the messages. Most times you don't, unless you're just bored at work. You normally work a 12-hour shift. You'll work like 3 days on, 2 days off, back and forth like that, 2 days on, 2 days off. And then you'll rotate from night shift, mid shift, and morning shift.
And these are communications that are coming in from overseas, our
Yes,
our
yes,
troops and
yes.
or
Groups and stateside.
okay, and
So the coolest thing I done, I got to go to NSA and I got to go to the CIA. I went to an intelligence award ceremony. I still think that's one of the coolest things I did in the military. So, you get to see on the wall the stars and things like that. So
yeah,
I thought that was pretty cool and honorable to be able to attend that intelligence ceremony.
yeah, because typically you only see that like in movies when they showcase it.
Right.
It's
Yeah,
not.
my unit got an award and they chose different. So I was enlisted. I was a specialist at the time, and so they sent me forward to that ceremony.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So reading through some of those messages, did any of that affect you? Did you
It did,
yeah.
because like the casualty messages would come in. So just think about like a switchboard type of operations, and you're having to make sure you have it in the right classification category and things like that as you're processing the messages
Yeah.
and making sure they stay secure and cannot get like tapped into.
So I would imagine like going to work is kind of like flipping your switch on, and then you essentially take your uniform off in the evening and you go home. But your mindset is in a combat zone, right?
Yeah.
Like it's imperative messages, some things are probably time sensitive. You don't want
Yes.
to get communication wrong or held up because it can impair the operations. So how was that going back and forth, essentially flipping that switch on and off, taking your uniform on and off for you?
I don't think I ever really was good at flipping my switch. As I've been retired since 2017, I've still been learning who Chantilly is and not being like so military minded. Because of my clearance level, I had a lot of situations where I had to see and do things that most typical soldiers would not have to. And I have actually deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq as well. So I'm still trying not to be so hyper vigilant now that I'm a civilian. But I still pretty much am. I keep my head on the swivel.
So to summarize, when you went home, you were still just on.
Yeah, I was on high alert. I have diagnosed PTSD, but I've been able to do different things to help me with that. So when I got back from Afghanistan, I was very jumpy. Like loud noises that would startle me, something I didn't expect would make me like my body would automatically jump and things like that. And
Yeah.
constantly feeling like you don't know who's around the corner.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can relate to a lot of that. And I've heard very similar things across the board from the women who've been on. Okay, so how long were you in at that duty station? And then what
At
came up
Fort
next? Mm-hmm.
I was there for about 2.5 years. After that, I went to Fort Drum, New York, and so soon as I get there, the snow, let me tell you, it's up to my waist. I have my niece with me who's about 3, so I'm trying to carry her, and that's how I was introduced to my battle buddy. Staff Sergeant Askew, and he helped me carry her because I was stumbling up to the company building trying to get in there. And then the sergeant major was sitting there in the orderly room, and he's like, "Who's this cute little girl?" And I'm like, "This is my niece. I have custody of her." La la la. And mind you, my dad had died in January 05, and I got to my duty station December 05. So I was still in mourning, taking care of my niece. I'm only about 21 years old at this time.
Wow.
And my sergeant major's like, she's beautiful, but she's gonna have to go back. Where you from? I'm like, Georgia. She's like, he's gonna have to go back. She's gonna have to go back there, Sergeant. I was like, huh? He's like, you ready to go forward? I said, forward where? He said, we're about to go to Afghanistan in less than 45 days. And I'm like, sure, Sergeant Major. Okay.
I
So,
what you say to Sergeant Major, right? No.
right. Why would I say I'm not ready? So
Right.
yeah, I had to say I was ready, and I had to take my niece back to Georgia, and we did deploy, in fact, to Afghanistan after that. I was at Bagram, Afghanistan. Um, by this time, I had reclassed to the 25 Bravo series. I was also at Bob Sharana in Afghanistan and Karakot Castle. Yeah, that's where I earned my combat action badge, was Afghanistan. Yeah.
So you did submit for it. I share what it takes for us to be awarded that badge, in that you have to write a sworn statement. You have to have two witnesses that write the sworn statement. And that was one of the ways I was able to get some statistics on female combat action badge awardees. And
Mm-hmm.
and otherwise, statistics on women who've served in combat are very hard to come by. So interesting. Do you mind sharing some of your
Um,
experiences in Afghanistan, and maybe what, I guess,
so
that award?
well, I ended up in Karakot Castle because I missed the flight somehow.
Okay, let's
It's very loud
about
on
that.
those rotary aircrafts, and I could not hear when that had several legs of the trip, so they stopped at several different fobs. Somehow I didn't hear my fob because I was in the very back of the aircraft, and they took off, and they were like, "That was Sharona." Bob Sharona. And I was like, that's where I'm supposed to be going. They were like, well, now you got to be at Karakot Castle. I mean, we got bombed all night long. I could not sleep. I was scared as crap. And constantly having to run to the bunker and full battle rattle was not fun. I was like, y'all got to get me out of here quick. So I was there for 48 hours, but that's not where the action badge came in. So Bob Sharana is where my unit was attacked. I served with the 37th Engineers out of Fort Bragg, South Carolina. And I'm still with the 10th Mountain Unit at this time. I was in a Division Special Troops Battalion. So we had units that were smaller units of our platoon that were with the infantry and the infantry, and we were with the engineers, so we can provide their comms. So we're providing their internet and their phones and emails and things like that on ground, and their radios and stuff. And so we had found a local national. He had gotten kicked off of the base because they found him doing a pace count with his feet from the top. And that was crazy because the way it was sectionalized was like a horseshoe. And we were the communications team was right across from the main top for the 37th Engineer Battalion. And the way they was walking, I was in a French chew, and I heard like a whistle. It was a mortar. And I was like, oh my God. And he was like, you got to get out of here so you can go to your unit and get proper accountability and things. And so I had to go in an outside bunker and try to get to my unit and make sure that I was properly accounted for so they can report it back to our primary base at Bagram. So the way they were doing it was just like a bunch of, it was very crazy. It was like whistling sound. You could boom, just kept like walking it in. And they were like trailers that we had for our office spaces. And it had like a porch with a cover on it, and it was like stairs. So I remember coming up, and as soon as I'm coming up, like it hit right in the middle of the top, and like the whole sky lit up. And I come sliding in, and there's a body sitting there on the porch. And it was First Sergeant Rafferty. He ended up dying that night. He was out of an engineer battalion, but as I was coming up, that's when the last mortar hit, and the shrapnel hit him in the neck. He had on his flak vest, but it hit him right here in the neck part. And he died that day. And before that, we had just had a soldier commit suicide the day before that with a saw. So, and we had to go and fix it and trace his last call, which was his wife. And he kind of got that Dear John letter. And it was a lot. The morale was very low. It was a very scary time. And like you said, to get the combat action badge, because so many people were right there. Like I said, I was right there when it hit. So you have to be in a certain proximity of that to be awarded a combat action badge.
Yeah.
So me and like 4 other people from my unit got it. And my battle buddy at the time, his name was Staff Sergeant Harrington. He's a sergeant major right now, but he was trying to administer first aid to First Sergeant Rafferty because he was a paramedic in New York at our home station, but he wasn't able to help him.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot in a short period of time.
Yes. Yeah. So.
You know, a lot of people don't recognize that just because women and now it's a little bit different, but 20 years ago, just because women were in a combat role or a combat job, that there was no chance that we would be a part of combat. But my situation is a little different because I was an MP, so I
Oh,
didn't realize that military police are just infantry with a badge, essentially. That's how we're trained. But the signal and any type of medical and supply and like things that actually allow everyone within the military to do their job efficiently, they have to go into
yes.
where our troops are, right? So it's like
I was
it's
under the misconception of that too, Dallas. I really was. I
right, and
didn't think I would really
we
be
don't
harmed away.
understand. Yeah, we don't understand it when we're signing, and of course, your recruiter is not going to tell you worst case scenarios. And like when you and I joined, it was before 9/11 anyway, so they're really not going to talk about it. But yeah, that is a discussion that just people don't think about when they and I want to do this whole study, and one of these days I'll do it, and I need someone to follow me around with a video camera, but I want to go into like public places, and I just want to ask one question to as many people as I can, and that is, when I say the word combat veteran to you, what does it look like? Like,
Mm.
tell me the image that comes to your mind, because it's not your face and it's not my face. It's someone probably between the ages of
Guy.
45 and 50, white male. And
Mm-hmm.
that is the stigma that I aim to help change and educate, because all the women that I've been able to connect with and who have shared their stories, I mean, I have everyone from combat engineers to nurses to signal to military police to, all of this. And I don't think any of us signed up to say, I like most men who join the military, like, oh, I want to go in the infantry and I want to shoot and, do all
Mm-hmm.
rangers and this, that, and the other. Like, we don't typically sign up to do any of that, but we often
Mm-hmm.
find, especially our generation, we found ourselves in areas and in roles that was either in a supporting role or in direct in direct operations that involve combat.
Yes.
So, whew, okay, so how long were you in Afghanistan for that first trip? Were there multiple?
No, I just went to Afghanistan once. And so 10th Mountain is one of those units that's a part of what they consider rapid deploying units when there is a war going on. And so I did participate in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. So I was home for a year after I returned from Afghanistan and then back. I well, not back. I went to Iraq after that. So I went to Afghanistan, January '06 to January '07. I was back at Fort Drum, New York from January '07 to April '08. So I deployed to Iraq April '08 and came back in April '09. And I was stop lost the entire time I was in Iraq. So I was not happy about that because they needed my signal job. And so I was scared. I was so scared, Dallas, to go to Iraq because I nearly died in Afghanistan. So I was scared to go to Iraq. I was really scared. But I made it. And thank God that I came back safely from there too.
Was your mission in Iraq similar to that of Afghanistan?
I no, not quite. I was mainly at the headquarters building.
Okay.
At
At
a
BIOP?
not at a fob in Iraq. No, it wasn't at a fob. I was at
And
Camp Victory in Iraq.
okay. I've been to Camp Victory. I have a picture in
Yeah.
front of the what? Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, have you seen that mural outside of the division headquarters?
I can't.
It was really nice. I'm gonna have to send you the picture. It's really
Yeah,
nice. Some
please.
soldiers painted it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
At Camp
and it was
Victory.
hard say
Okay.
again.
I was just saying, Camp Victory was one of those places like you kind of everyone really wanted to go visit just because it was such a beautiful place. And for those
It
of you
was.
who don't know, you should Google it. You'll see it. It's a palace that's surrounded by water and
Yes,
it's beautiful.
it is.
Especially when I lived in the Abu Ghraib prison. That
Oh
is
wow.
where I was at prior to all the BS that went down there. So you know, living with rats and bats and cats and rabid dogs and all the things and the camel spiders. When we went to Camp Victory, I was just like, wow, like there's
Different.
gold and golden toilets. And I'm like, you know,
Yeah,
it's a very beautiful place.
it is beautiful. It is beautiful. It looks way better than Afghanistan, Iraq does to me.
Yeah,
At least where I was stationed at. Probably because I kept going to FOBs in Afghanistan.
probably.
And FOB means forward operation base for those who don't know.
Thank you for sharing with them. All right. So wow, girl, like 2 years in a matter of 3 years. 2 out of the 3 years you're deployed.
Mm-hmm. And so my cousin worked in HR. And when I got back, I said, cousin, I cannot, you got to get me out of this rapid deploying unit. I cannot keep going. I'm not going to be okay if I have to keep going to combat.
Yeah.
Because I had the Sergeant Major Harrington, who I mentioned, he had already deployed by the time I met them and joined their unit. He and Staff Sergeant Askew had already deployed at least 4 times with the unit. And I'm like, I cannot be like them. I have to get out of here.
So what move did you make?
So I got him to help me get an assignment, and I went to Fort Lee, Virginia.
Okay.
So while I was at Fort Lee, Virginia, I worked with reserve units, helping them train for deployment with their communications devices and programming them.
Like you're like,
I mean, my whole military career, I've been working with combat in some kind of way, basically. So I don't.
Right. But I mean, that's good. Like, honestly, if you think about it, like, who else better to equip them, right? Like, you've been there, you've done that, you've experienced it. You have years of expertise in your job assignment. I think that's amazing. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I first went over, I was not I was not mentally, emotionally, physically prepared to endure anything that I had. And in a way, me being naive kind of saved me because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't have any expectations. And I look back now and I'm like, oh my God, that was really bad. Whereas I've talked to some people who the last Jane, that her name's Tracy. Tracy's recording, she had been in for 19 years and got stop lossed at 19 years prior to her retirement and ended up in Iraq as an E7. So
that's very frustrating to get stop loss.
Right. And so it's just like her and I shared such a different perspectives because she kind of knew what was expected and in the leadership role. And then for me, I was like, well, I was 19 when I went over, so I didn't know what to expect. And she's like, how frustrating. And I'm like, yeah, after the fact, it was frustrating. So, all right. So Fort Lee, Virginia, training troop. I think that's amazing. Is that where you finished out the rest of your career, or what does the rest look like?
Fort Lee is where I decided to switch over and become a chief warrant officer.
Oh,
so
okay. Yeah. Huge pivot.
I left there and I went to Fort Rucker for warrant officer candidate school. Then
why pursue warrant officer? Tell me about
one of the things about being in different units that are catered to like infantry, combat, and all of those type of units is that you get wherever they need you is where you get placed. And I knew with warrant officers, I would be like the technical expert and I would have to work specifically in my field. I was tired of working different MOSs in jobs that didn't really necessarily pertain to 25 Bravo. So I wanted some consistency and I wanted to get more knowledge and learn more about IT and get deeper into it. And I knew I could do that as a technical expert, as a warrant officer.
Very smart and strategic. I love it.
I'm very strategic. I think the military definitely helped me be that for sure.
Yeah. But for you to even just take a step back and be like, okay, if I continue down this road, who knows where the hell I'm going to end up and who knows what I'm going to end up doing. Again, for those of you civilians who don't know, like just because I go to school to be this, that, or the other at the basic, which is why they call it basic training, right? At the core, at the foundation of our training, we're trained to do anything and everything. I mean, we go through like you learn how to administer an IV and help someone through crap. And you know how, I mean, I can't even tell you how many T-posts I pounded in concertina wire I laid. So I'm like an engineer, baby medic, I'm an MP, I'm like, you know what I mean? Like you said,
a janitor from buffing floors.
Right, janitor, we do what we have to do. Like, and I think one of my best qualities that I love about myself, and 1,000%, if it wasn't born out of the military, it was definitely nurtured from the military, is my resourcefulness.
Yes.
And I think
Very
all
agile and
military,
resourceful. You have
yeah,
to be able to adapt.
we have that amazing skill. And I think so many military who are struggling to transition into the civilian life have a hard time recognizing that that is probably one of the most valuable assets that we have. And it comes naturally at this point, right? Because you are forced to
Mm-hmm.
figure it out. Like my son will be like, "Oh, well, this is broken." And I'm like, "We can fix it." Just give me,
Yeah.
like, you feel like a MacGyver, and if you don't know who
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling old right now, but go Google that too. But I feel like I'm kind of a MacGyver in that fact. So recognizing the skill sets that were given to us, but embracing it, right? Because anyone can
Yeah.
do it, but you embrace that strategic mindset and then you used it to project your career. And I think that's amazing.
Thank you. Yes. I did enjoy becoming a chief warrant officer. It was hard. It was like basic training times three. Um, it was time management is what they really, really preached, but it was tough. It was mainly mental, but a lot of physical as well. Um, After that, my first assignment was Fort Bliss. I was with 1AD there, and we were ramping up to deploy to Afghanistan. That caused a lot of anxiety. So we had a lot of field exercise training. We went to NTC in California, and we had a lot of local field training. El Paso, Texas, Fort Bliss, that is the desert. So that's a perfect environment to train. We trained at White Sands Missiles too.
Yeah.
But
So did you deploy as a warrant officer?
I did not. So we were supposed to deploy, but then they ended up disbanding our unit
Hmm.
and standing up another unit, and we didn't have to deploy. So I was grateful for that because that was bringing me a lot of anxiety, and I didn't feel confident with my direct leaders that were supposed to be deploying with me. So I was glad that we didn't.
Good, good. So did you finish at Fort Bliss, or did you move to
No,
another?
unfortunately, my military career, I didn't
You're
get
all
out.
over the place, girl.
Right. I had so much instability. I was like moving like every 2 years. And I was like, this is not normal. Why do I have to keep moving? So
Mhm.
from Fort Bliss, I was there for about 2 years. And like I said, they disbanded the unit. So then I PCS instead of going to another unit because they didn't need my MOS as a warrant officer at Fort Bliss anymore. So at the Fort Bliss, I went to Fort Campbell,
Mhm.
Kentucky, and that's another division. So that's I went with the field artillery there, and that was a new unit. And so it was majority males there. And throughout my whole military career, I experienced a lot of sexual harassment and craziness. So that's some of the things that I had to like heal from and deal with since I haven't been in the military because the mission always came first when I was in the military. So I didn't have time to deal with my emotions or my traumas. I just took and rolled. Just tucked my emotions and kept on keeping on. So I was at Fort Campbell for about 2 years with the field artillery unit. And then I ended up at Shaw Air Force Base in the RCENT, the Army Central Command Unit. And that's at Shaw Air Force Base. And that's where I retired out medically.
You medically retired.
Yes, I had gotten type 2 diabetes and sleep
Ooh,
apnea too. So I think a lot of it was like stress induced because stress can really make some underlying health issues come surface level.
yeah. I've read many things that says stress is at the core of just about all disease. I believe
Yep,
it.
it really
I
is.
believe it.
Stress
Yeah.
in our diet. Hmm.
All right. Well, talk to me about transitioning out and what your mindset was like and kind of adjusting and preparing yourself for civilian life.
My mindset was all over the place. I had a lot of anxiety, being that I joined at 17. At this time, I'm 36, and I was like, what am I going to do? I mean, it's hard to go from being a chief warrant officer to becoming at the bottom of the totem pole or wherever you're going to start working.
Mhm.
So I said I was going to give myself a break. I only gave myself a month break before I started working for the Air Force as a IT contractor for their intelligence department. Yeah. So, but I had to really find myself. And I didn't even start that until after I worked for the Air Force for about 4 years.
It's interesting that you found yourself back within the military.
I know, but I realized that was triggering me to work in the Air Force sector. So that's why I had to quit my job. I was making very good money, but I felt my inner being was telling me, you need to take a knee, soldier, and take care of that mind and that heart of yours and get your mental right.
It was good for you to listen to that. So many don't, and they feel I've had friends who they just don't transition well, and they need that structure, and they have a hard time finding the structure outside of the military. So they either go back or they end up as contractors and they end up right back deployed in the same thing. And then it's like band-aid over bullet wound, band-aid over bullet wound over again. And then they're dysfunctional when they come home. They don't know how to adjust. So good on you for recognizing. But what are some of the things? I mean, recognizing that you need to heal is one thing, and that's a huge step forward, huge. But how did you start to heal? What are some of the things that helped you? And even what are some of the things that you tried that didn't help you?
Some of the things that what didn't help me, it's going to sound wrong to say or odd, but therapy didn't help me. It did not help me. I mean, maybe because I have a bachelor's in psychology, so I kind of know some of the stuff.
When you say
but
therapy, you're
most of the time,
talking about traditional talk therapy.
yeah, that didn't work for me. It seemed like for some reason the therapists always end up telling me about their life instead. And I'm like, hey, you're supposed to be here for me. And then one thing about therapy is like I got tired of starting over because, like I said, I kept moving so much and I had so much instability. It was like causing me some anxiety to keep starting over with a different therapist. So I got turned off from therapy in that way. But since I had retired from the military, the main thing that helped me was like first, like frequency sounds, reading self-help books, meditating, journaling, changing the way I ate, all of those things, changing my sleep patterns and things like that, that really helped me. And really honing in on focusing on intentionally healing. That's the things that help me.
Would you journal about your experiences?
I would, like when I'm in a bad mental space or something, I would try to get to the root. Like if I got triggered, I would try to journal what was said or done or not said or done that caused me to feel triggered or feel a not so happy feeling, and then why. And I don't know if you ever heard of Abraham Hicks, but I feel like they saved my life. Have you heard of
Tell us
Abraham
more.
Hicks?
I haven't, but tell me more.
Well, it's like a collective consciousness, and it like speaks through I can't even think of her name right now, I'm drawing a blank, but it was her and her husband Jerry, and they were in tune with their inner being, and then they started tapping into that collective consciousness and just trying to help you change the way you think and see life and know that everything is a choice. And so it really is. I've read a good book a few years ago called Battlefield of the Mind by Joyce Meyer, and it really helped shape me and understand the power of the mind and how I can change a not so good feeling thought. Like, don't sit and dwell in it, because that's where that depression comes in at, when you keep repeating and sitting and soaking in it. And, get out and do something else. If I know I'm feeling sad, don't just stay in the house with the curtains drawn. Get out and get some sunlight. Get out and touch some grass with your bare feet or some sand. Go to the beach. So different nature things were helping me as well.
Yeah. I'm a huge believer in any holistic therapy, anything.
Yes.
That is the only thing that has helped me as well. I went through years of talk therapy like you. I also felt like it turned into like a girlfriend hour. And I'm like, I'm not here to be your girlfriend. I don't want to hear about your issues. Like I
Absolutely.
like am genuinely trying to like get to the bottom of some things. And it wasn't until it was I don't know if you've heard of like resonance repatterning, but it's in at the subconscious level, and frequencies and diet was a huge thing as well. I'm not a huge journaler, which is weird because my book is literally the journal that I kept during deployment, but that was kind of just a freak thing that happened. But I have found like when I am in a mood, and it could be like a sad, mad mood, it's a very high emotional mood, I do want to write it. And it's so empowering. I don't know if that's the right word to use. How do you feel when you write it down? Like it's almost like you're back in control of it, like you're understanding.
It's
And that
different when you're verbalizing it and you're writing, you're scripting it, because
yeah,
it's like it's in your head, it's in your heart. But to be able to see it on paper, it's like sometimes you can't express it and you don't feel comfortable talking to other people outside of yourself about
yeah,
some things. So being able to write it out really helps. It
yeah.
makes me feel like I'm able to release it on the paper.
Right, like you're being heard by the piece of paper, and that almost sounds
Yeah.
silly, but it is. It's you are
Yeah.
being heard, and at the end of the day, I feel like that's what sometimes we need is to be heard.
Yes.
And then you said something key that I think is so incredible, and I want to touch on again is that when you were journaling, you would ask yourself why. And I've gone through a couple exercises with my therapy in that I would write something down, but then it'd be like, okay, well, why? And then you would do that 6 times over. And when you dig, and peel those layers back, it was like you would actually get at the core of whatever it was you were exploring. And it was, for me, remarkable to have that type of understanding.
Yes. So, and also what really helped me is learning how to be present, like how to just be present and be
Yeah.
still, and how to slow my mind down, because being a combat vet, being a vet at all, you're constantly rapidly adjusting to change, and it's always the hurry up and wait, and the being resourceful and figuring things out and making it happen, and focusing on everybody outside of you, because the mission is going to be first. That's going to be before your family, your friends, and yourself. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of sacrifices you have to make,
Yeah. That
but being
that
present is my biggest thing. Like, I can't dwell and I can't leave my mind in Afghanistan or take my mind constantly back there or Iraq or whatever I mean experience in the military. I have to be able to be present, because if I'm not present, I'm robbing myself of today's joy. And if I'm staying in the past, I can't be present. And if I'm worried about the future, I'm still robbing myself of today's joy. So I'm just going to be present. I'm going to be.
guys, rewind and listen to that again, because that is wisdom in its finest. And that's truly what helps me through my anxiety, because I get anxious.
Mhm.
What's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. I got to plan. I got to prep. I got to do all the things. And it's like, okay, like I would walk outside and I would look around me and I'd be like, okay, I am here and I have a home and my kids are healthy. And like, it was just, yeah, about being in that moment in the way you just said it. Like, I'm going to rewind it and read and listen back to it. That's a good reminder to be present. And I don't think, guys, you don't have to go through combat or some crazy traumatic experience to get stressed out about your future or be a little depressed
Right.
about your past. And I think that you can take that wisdom that Chantilly just shared, any of you, and leverage it. And I feel like it's going to bring you back to a place of humility and gratitude.
Yes. And that really helped too, having gratitude, because some people did make it back.
Yeah.
And so I have to be grateful for that. Some people didn't survive some of the things I've survived, not just combat. I'm just saying, like, you have
Yeah.
to be grateful for a few things.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I try to do I well, I don't try. I absolutely reflect at the end of my days and I always like, okay, like what am I thankful for today? That's good. But I mean, you've taken this incredible journey that you've been on and the highs, the lows, the ins, the outs, and all of it. And you have just recently launched and are starting some remarkable things there. Tell me about, it's Silence Daughters, or
Yes,
right?
Silence Daughters.
Yeah.
Yes. Silence Daughters is still in its infancy, but our primary goal is to help others find their voice. Is their truth, their voice, our fight. So that's our motto.
I
So
love that.
yes, your truth, your voice, our fight. So we're in it together. Like you said, people just want to be heard. And I feel like a lot of us are silenced in life. It doesn't have to be a survivor of SA, but Silence Daughters, it was founded by me, because I'm a survivor of sexual abuse and domestic violence. And that's what the organization focuses on, helping women who are survivors of those two things find their voice and heal and find happiness and thrive after that.
Amazing. Do you guys have a website? Are you on social media? Where can people learn more?
We're on social media on Facebook right now, and it's Silence Daughters. That's the name.
Yeah, so go find them on Facebook if you're a Facebooker. Support this
Yeah, so
initiative.
we work in the local community and eventually we'll branch out, but we like to go to like women's shelters. I'm a licensed esthetician and I'm a licensed cosmetology instructor. And so I like to give free services and sometimes get the students to come with me so they can give back to the community as well. And I do makeup. And so I try to do things like incorporate beauty things into helping people heal, like heal the concealed, and we'll do makeup and things like that because you use concealer normally to cover flaws and things like that on your face.
Yeah.
And so just really promoting to not bury and be silenced by anything, to be able to speak your truth, even if your voice shakes.
Yeah. Love that. Even if your voice shakes. Ooh, girl. So you made me think of something that is one of kind of my missions with not only the podcast, but the retreat that will be happening next summer as a spin-off of the podcast. In that a lot of women have shared through their stories that they've lost their sense of identity. And what they're really insinuating after I help them peel back a couple layers is that they lost their sense of femininity.
Mm, mhm.
Did you experience that?
I
Do you
did. I felt like I didn't like I had to learn, like I said before, I had to learn who Chantilly was because, the military, they shape you how they want to shape you, which is great. And I was just a soldier through and through.
yeah,
So I was taught to suck it up when you didn't like what somebody said or did to you. And I kind of took that on the outside world too, outside of the military. And that's why I had to take a knee too, to realize that I don't have to sacrifice my mental space or my happiness for a dollar amount. I definitely can't do that. So if not, I'm not okay. My family can't be okay.
right. So how did you find your way back? I know you said that it's still a work in progress and it will
Mhm.
probably be forever. Healing is a journey, not a destination.
Lifelong, yes.
Yeah,
I think healing is a lifelong journey.
yeah,
And sometimes you have things buried so deep, you don't even know until you're triggered by it. But that's when I get to journaling like, okay, was I really mad at this person at work? Or what triggered me about what they said or done?
mhm,
And then I can not fix the trigger, but it can't be a trigger if you get to the source of it. You can't be triggered by something that is something that causes you issues. But that's why I say healing is a lifelong journey. So sometimes you have to be triggered to know that there's something wrong or something underlining that doesn't sit right with you.
Sounds like almost like you embrace the trigger then, because you're
Yeah,
rediscovering ways to
I
rebuild
don't
your.
let it. I don't really let anything that I knew that used to be a trigger. It's no longer a trigger because why would I give something outside of me power to trigger me if I'm in touch with myself?
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way you said it is, I think, similar to just how I put it, and that's just being aware. Like, me having
Yes.
awareness, like, gives me back the power.
Yes. Yes. I seen my life change when I gained a greater awareness of myself. So self-awareness has been helping me jump leaps and bounds past my traumas. I really am grateful because I honestly used to think that I would never be happy just because I was so sad inside and so hurt and so ashamed of different things that I've experienced that I just didn't feel like I would be. But I am happy today. I am healed. I am healing. And that's what my goal in Silence Daughters is to do, is to help other people heal.
I love that. Thank you for just
Welcome.
being courageous and vulnerable and taking your life up to this point and putting it out there like a bleeding heart that you're holding in your hand for all to see so that you can help others through their storm.
Yeah, because some people and family members are like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you share that." Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, "It might be tea to you, honey, but this is my testimony, and I'm going to testify to be able to help somebody else. If I can help one person, that's enough for me, Dallas. If I can help one person know that they're worthy, know that there's life after trauma and after the military, and that the military doesn't validate your self worth, and that you can be cool and a trooper even outside of the military."
Yeah, I feel the same. Well, if there's anything I can do to help you on your mission, you just let me know. And oh, you've already, just for everyone on the record, you've already been so gracious to for me the same. Obviously the fundraiser is in a few months, and if you could make it to Montana, that would be incredible. But
I've
there's
never
always
been to
planning.
Montana. I was talking about last night. I was like, I'm gonna have to go there. She was telling me how beautiful it is and how it
Yeah,
stays
this time
sunlight to like
for
10 at
sure.
night.
Yeah. But if anything, it will be an annual thing, so you'll have to join us next year. And then I feel strongly that you're going to have some type of hand in the retreat come 2025.
I would love that.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I have a million ideas already. So of course we will stay in touch. And again, guys, you can find Chantilly on social media, support her mission of Silenced Daughters. And I will leave the last words to you if there's anything that you would like to leave our audience with, and then we'll close it up.
I just want to say that anything that happens to you is not your fault, but how you choose to move forward, that's on you. So either you can stay in the past, worry about the future, or be present.
Be sure to subscribe for more episodes of the Not So Average Jane podcast.